My name is Peter Reynolds. I was elected the leader of cannabis law reform back in February of this year. We are a UK political party. We're not in the business of winning seats, we're in the business of winning influence. It wouldn't be right for them to go for seats because we are a single issue party. That's not to say that we won't be standing in elections, because we will do. We'll stand in elections to oppose people who support prohibition. And we'll stand in elections, we'll work with parties who will agree with our policies to support them and actually to put people on the ground to help them. The first thing I should do is say thank you very much to Paul Flynn for sponsoring this event. Thank you very much, Paul, as a result of you we're here. We're here to present to you the study Taxing the UK Cannabis Market. On the panel is myself, Matthew Atha, who is the director of the Independent Drug Monitoring Unit, the organisation, the research organisation who's put together the study. Paul Flynn, who, as you will know, is an MP for Newport West. It's a complete coincidence. I'm a Newport boy as well. I did leave over 50 years ago. Sue Blackmore, who's the psychologist, writer for The Guardian, for Psychology Today, and Jim Duffy, who's an ex-inspector from Strathclyde Police and now a representative of LEAP, that is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So, in your press pack, you will see, first of all, there's a press release setting out some of the key points of today's announcement. There's the actual report taxing the UK cannabis market, which has got all the data and statistics. There's the clear plan for the regulation of cannabis in Britain. Now this is a detailed document. We've done an awful lot of work on this internally. This has been done before in the sense that Transform gave it a go, but I think when you have a look at this you'll realise that it's never been done in as much detail and with as much consideration. It is a discussion document, clearly. Then in addition to that you'll find there's three of our leaflets. First of all, Toke Pure. This is harm reduction. The government, the Home Office, people are overflowing with telling us that cannabis is harmful and how much damage it can do. But here's actually an effort to do something about harm reduction. It's a scientific fact. The most dangerous thing about cannabis is smoking it with tobacco. So we're trying to encourage people, if they're going to smoke cannabis, not to smoke it with tobacco. The general leaflet about clear with membership information, and then there's our medicinal cannabis leaflet, which features some short case studies on a number of people who use cannabis for medicinal purposes. In addition to that, I've also put in copies of my latest correspondence with Baroness Brown, the Drugs Minister, and David Cameron, which will illustrate the dreadful response that anybody gets on this subject. It's probably the very antithesis of democracy, the way the ministers deal with the drugs issue and the cannabis issue. We approach them about it in a reasonable, considered way, and you're simply rejected. So I just wanted to put that in there to illustrate. I'm not going to make this not a party political broadcast, but I do just want to set this in context. These are our aims and objectives. The overall one is to end the prohibition of cannabis. Our second and most urgent objective is to permit the prescription of medicinal cannabis by doctors. And our third objective, which is really most focused on what we're here today for, is a system of regulation. But if you'll permit me, I do want to just say a couple of words about medicinal use, because this is what really fires me up. This is what puts passion in my belly, is the whole issue of medicinal use. Because the situation in this country is a bit like a Franz Kafka novel, or to use a more up-to-date analogy, perhaps like a Jason Bourne movie. Because nothing is what it seems. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's all misinformation, deception, untruths. You know, we're in a position where there are now hundreds, literally hundreds, of peer-reviewed scientific studies that demonstrate the value of cannabis in a wide range of conditions. And yet, on the other hand, we have a Home Office that is incapable of saying anything except there's no medicinal value in cannabis. We know now that the endocannabinoid system, which was only discovered in 1988, and so we have to recognise that most people in Parliament have probably never heard of it. Most GPs have never heard of it, because most GPs don't have time to read research. But the endocannabinoid system is fundamental to all aspects of life. the central nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the immune system, the gastrointestinal system, the reproductive system. These are all regulated by cannabinoids. And the only source of cannabinoids outside the body, extraordinarily, is the cannabis plant. There is one other source of cannabinoids outside the body, which I think illustrates the beneficial effects of cannabis. It comes from inside the body, and that is mother's milk. Mother's milk is absolutely packed with cannabinoids, with endocannabinoids, because they are so necessary to nurture and promote life. So we have a Prime Minister who, on the YouTube Al Jazeera program back in March, said that the medical authorities were free to determine whether or not cannabis could be used medicinally. But if you approach the Home Office and ask them about it, they'll say, no, we're not even prepared to review it. And that's it, they're not even prepared to review it. And the reason they're not prepared to review it is because the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs has not identified any medicinal benefits. Les Iverson, who I count as a friend, has written to me separately, saying quite categorically, the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs is not constituted to advise on medicinal benefits. And yet this is the excuse that is being given. And the other thing that's important to remember is these people who are approaching them, apart from me, from a political basis, hundreds of people who are approaching them are people in pain, suffering, and disability. People, a lot of them who don't frankly have the energy or the work, aren't able to cope with pushing for what should be their right. We have a situation where in America, in California alone, a state with 35 million people, the medical marijuana market is reckoned to be worth $9.5 billion by the year 2015. We have a situation where the Home Office again is saying no medicinal value in cannabis, but they have granted a unique license to GW Pharmaceuticals, which in effect has given them what is almost certainly an unlawful monopoly. And at the same time, they're promoting misinformation that Sativex, their product, is not cannabis, does not get you high, does not provide the euphoria that people using cannabis recreation. If you look at the Sativex SPC, the summary of product characteristics, it says, commonly, euphoric mood. I put in 6 press complaints commissions complaints only last weekend, because there was a story saying exactly this about trials of Sativex in Manchester hospitals. Every single one came up with this nonsense, trying to promote the idea that cannabis is not, that Sativex is not cannabis. So, we're moving on to the report itself. These are some of the key facts. There are something like 3 million regular users of cannabis in Britain. That's people who use it between daily and monthly. There are 300,000 growers. I think that's a staggering figure. And there are direct costs of something like £500 million associated with cannabis alone. The total cannabis market is worth about £6 billion, and this perhaps is the single most extraordinary thing about the whole situation. Our government, our present policy, just gifts this to organised crime. You know, I suppose politicians, governments attempts to says that prohibition provides some form of control, but prohibition provides no control at all. It certainly doesn't provide any control for children, protection for children. You know, I was horrified when I came here back in June, I think it was, and watched Charles Walker make his speech about cannabis and psychosis in young people, and he came out with the outrageous statement that cocaine was less harmful for children than cannabis was. But there is no protection for children available at all at the moment. The only ID that a dealer asks for is a £20 note. The facts are, and I can substantiate this, I can discuss it with you, the health risks of cannabis are hundreds of times less than almost any other recreational, prescription-only or over-the-counter medicine you want to talk about. But we have huge problems with cannabis farms destroying neighbourhoods. I think it went for, I think the figures went from something like 400 in 2007 to something like 6,000 in 2009. Extraordinary. And this is all organised crime, often Vietnamese people. Vietnamese people, some of whom have been human trafficked in here, are forced to work as slaves. They end up going to jail for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. People behind it get away with it. So tax and regulate policy would provide some control. It would provide thousands of new jobs. It would mean that I'm not saying it would eliminate it going to children and people and vulnerable people, but it would make the situation much better than it is. And the most extraordinary thing of all, we'd be looking at, this is the best estimate, 6.7 billion per annum net gain to the UK exchequer. Now that's in a range, the top of that range is 9.5 billion. Now as I understand it, 6 billion is, you know, it's cuts that everybody spends all their time talking about, the cuts, if you like, that have originated so far, they're matched about 6 billion. I heard Nick Clegg on the radio as I was coming in today, saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could wave a magic wand and find a pot of gold? Well, here it is. I'm going to hand over to Matthew now, who will talk to you a little bit about the methodology used to prepare the report. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Atha. I'm the Director of the Independent Drug Monitoring Unit. We're a small independent research consultancy specialising in the study of the UK drugs market, drug consumption, and a wide range of issues relating to illegal drugs. We fund ourselves by providing legal casework, expert witness services for courts. We do not receive any by this report, a commercial commission, by Clear. We provided the report to the best of our ability. Put simply, the current methods that are used by the government for establishing prevalence of cannabis use is the British Crime Survey. And this is where researchers go along with the clipboard to people's houses and ask them a number of questions about crime, including drugs. They say that it's confidential, but you know, if you are approached by somebody who's employed by the Home Office coming to your front door, would you actually tell the truth to them about an illegal activity that you engage in? My answer is probably not. And certainly figures where they've actually looked at people who are actually being drug tested find about 40% don't actually disclose drug use even when they know they're going to be tested. So we regard that as very much a baseline, and what we instead have looked at is the proportion of people who have actually been arrested for cannabis use within our surveys. We conduct large-scale surveys of drug use, and we have been doing so since, I've personally been doing so since the mid-1980s, but as an organisation we've been doing so annually since 1997. And one of the questions we ask is, if they've been arrested for cannabis use, and if so, how many times? How long have they been using cannabis? How often do they use cannabis? How much do they use? How much do they pay for it? Oh, wide range of questions. And we've had, over the years, now nearly 30,000 respondents involved since 1994. From that, we established that regular users are those most likely to be arrested, much more likely than casual users. And from the proportion of those arrested and the total number of arrests for cannabis from official statistics, we're able to extrapolate year on year the number of people we estimate who are actually occasional casual users and regular users of the drug, which are all found in the report. So we estimate that it's somewhere between about 1.7 and 3.6 million regular users of cannabis, with an average of about 2.7 million. Using an average of about 10 grams a week, can go up to about half an ounce a day in the very heaviest users, but although the majority of users use less than that, around the sort of gram a day mark would be typical. And from that we estimate the total size of the cannabis market is around about 1,000, on average about 1,000 metric tonnes a year. We also able to break down that market by the type of cannabis people use, and our figures very closely mirror the actual seizure statistics. Excuse me, I'm going to get myself some more. We also look at attitudes to cannabis use and use of all drugs, to be honest. And we found that when declassification down to Class C was being talked about, the actual user ratings of cannabis went down to record levels. But when it was going back to Class B, the user ratings went back up again. So it looks like when the fruit is, should we say, slightly less forbidden, it loses much of its sweetness. And it very much illustrates the point that prohibition doesn't actually